My name is David. I came to this company when things were on the brink. Debts, turnover, a collapsed sales department. In a year, I increased turnover 4 times, built a motivation system, saved key clients, and it seemed like everything was heading towards deserved recognition. But one day I was called to an informal meeting with the new director. He didn't even look me in the eye. He just said, "We decided that you are no longer suitable for us." Without a reason, without gratitude, without severance pay, I left silently. While they celebrated my dismissal, I was preparing a response. 3 months later, I opened my own company. The same niche, the same services. And you know what? Their top clients were my personal developments. I knew what they needed. I knew what they were afraid of, and I knew how to do it better. 6 months later, almost their entire market was mine. The company I saved began to sink. In a panic, they sent me an offer to return, this time as a consultant. The amount was 10 times my previous salary. I agreed, but only to be there when they finally lost. And that was only the first act. I accepted their offer, but on one condition: complete autonomy in decisions. They were desperate, so they agreed. I became a consultant, but I played by my own rules. Every step I took was calculated. I began to destroy from the inside what I had once built. I optimized budgets, restructured departments, cut staff, transferred clients to my contractors, and they, of course, were connected with my new company. Over the course of 3 months, I squeezed the last resources out of them, executing deals through third parties. When everything began to collapse, deliveries were disrupted, employees left, profits fell. The management held an emergency meeting. They were in a panic. One of the investors threw the reports on the table and screamed, "What's going on?" I said opposite, calm, in a perfectly ironed suit. "This," I said, "is the result when you betray the one who built your success." I stood up, handed them the termination papers, and walked out, leaving them in the chaos they deserved. Now, my new company is valued at $18 million. And guess who applied to work for me? Yes, the CFO who signed off on me. When I saw his name on the list of candidates, I didn't believe it at first. The same person who was the first to put the brakes on my promotion. The one who easily signed off on my dismissal, now he's asking me for a chance. The resume looked perfect. Dozens of successful projects, references that seemed to be written from a carbon copy, and a note at the bottom, ready to start immediately. Not a hint that we had once sat in the same office. He didn't even know that the company was now mine. I scheduled an interview. He walked into the office, a little older, uncertain, but still arrogant. "Thank you for finding time for me," he began. I didn't answer. I just turned in my chair and looking at him. "You don't recognize me, do you?" He froze. He looked at me for a few seconds, trying to remember. And then his face turned pale. It's you." "Yes," I said calmly. "I'm the one you fired. Without explanation. Without a chance. Just because of pressure from above." "Well then." I reached for the stack of papers where the contract lay. "You want a job? I'll give it to you. But now I dictate the terms. The salary is half as much, no bonuses. The probationary period is indefinite. And every day you will sit in the office with my portrait hanging on the wall. Can you live with that?" He sat in silence. Then finally he squeezed out, "Yes." I smiled. "Welcome back. This time as a subordinate." He walked out of the office, his shoulders slumped, the contract in his hands. I watched him through the glass partition. Seeing the man who had once taken everything from me now enter the building where I was in charge was almost strange. Not joy, not anger. Something else. Cold satisfaction. 2 weeks passed. He worked quietly without complaints. He didn't tell anyone who he was. No one knew. For the team, he was just a new project manager. For me, a reminder that the past doesn't forget. But he started making mistakes, small but constant. Reports with numbers didn't add up. A key client almost left because of his miscalculation. I called him back. "Are you okay?" "This isn't like you," I said, looking straight at him. He nodded. "I just, haven't worked at this pace in a long time. And yeah, to be honest, I didn't think I'd end up here again, especially in front of you." I was silent. "I just signed the order then. You know it wasn't my initiative. Pressure from above. You were inconvenient, smart, faster than everyone else. A threat. I turned you in because it was easier. Forgive me." These words didn't touch me. They were late. Very late. I opened the desk drawer and took out the letter. "This is a complaint from a client. Your mistake cost us $180,000. I have to fire you. But I won't. Do you know why?" He looked at me with alarm. "Because I need you, as a reminder. As proof that revenge is not a bullet in the forehead. It is a system, a mechanism, which presses slowly." And then he understood that his punishment had only just begun. He left with his head down. He didn't say a word. And I was left sitting in the chair, staring at the closed door. There was no triumph inside. There was only an empty echo of how much pain it had cost me to get to this point. The next day, I gathered everyone for a morning meeting. A routine meeting, as always. The only difference was that I gave him the floor, right in front of the whole team. Brad will be leading a new project for an investor from Singapore. He will present the plan himself. Any questions to him? He turned pale, because he knew he couldn't handle it, and I knew he knew. It was a test, or even a trap. Officially framed as a promotion. He could have refused. But that meant admitting weakness, and pride is his main enemy. He agreed. 3 weeks passed. The project was sinking. The investors sent a letter of complaint. The team started whispering, "How did he even get here? Who let him into management? This is a disaster." And then I took the next step. I invited the investor to a meeting, right in the office, in front of everyone. And I asked Brad to explain himself. He was stumbling, flustered, sweating under the lights. His confidence was melting away right before everyone's eyes. In the end, I just quietly said, "Thank you, Brad. I think the investor and I need to discuss this in private." When he left, I waited for a pause. I turned to the investor and said, "This man once destroyed my career. Today I gave him a chance and he buried himself. Publicly, honestly. No pressure, just fairness." The investor nodded. Respectfully, "You didn't break him. You let him do it himself." I nodded back. That was my goal. And in the evening, I called Brad into the office. He had already understood everything. He took the application, without words, and left. Forever. And only I knew he would remember this day for the rest of his life. I worked my ass off, days, nights, all for a project that was going to change not only my life, but the company. And Brad, he just watched. He seemed like a friend. He supported me, wrote down ideas, offered to help. But at the right moment, he shot. He stole my presentation, passed it off as his own, and signed the contract I dreamed of. And me, I didn't even get a call. Do you understand what it's like? Watching someone steal not just my job, step by step, but my chance at a future. I was broken, but I didn't break. I went into hiding. I studied the market. I met with competitors. I filed a patent application for the idea he stole. And as Brad stood in front of investors preparing for the final signing, I walked into the room with a legal team and an official notification. You should have seen his face. And this is just the beginning. Because I didn't just come back, I came for everything. After that day, everything changed. A shadow of doubt appeared in the eyes of everyone who used to pat Brad on the back. They started asking questions. Who was the real author of the project? Why was the contract suspended? And most importantly, who is this guy who came back so brazenly? I was no longer just an employee. I became a threat. Brad tried to get out of the situation gracefully. He lied in the interview that I was just an assistant. But paper doesn't burn. I had all the evidence. Correspondence, drafts, even CCTV footage of him printing out my documents late at night. But I didn't immediately post everything. No, I waited. I invested my last money in a startup, the very idea he stole. Only mine was truly refined. I knew how to do it better, louder, faster. And 3 months later, my project took off. Investors? They found me themselves, the press. They spread the story like a virus. And Brad? He lost everything. Contract, reputation, trust. Even his LinkedIn was empty. But most importantly, he understood. I didn't come back for an apology. I came back for my name, for respect, and for revenge. Weeks passed. My startup was growing so fast that even those who had recently kept quiet started talking about it. I found myself at a conference in San Francisco where I was introduced as the new face of fintech innovation. Ironic? This was the very area where Brad had once betrayed me. He was sitting in the audience, not in the front row, somewhere in the back, trying to seem inconspicuous. But I saw him. When I went on stage and started talking about the project, I fell silent for a moment. The room went silent. Everyone asks where the idea came from, I said. Honestly, they tried to steal it from me, to erase my name. But I came back. I wasn't taking revenge. I was just reminding them whose dream it was. The applause was quick to come. Brad left unnoticed. He no longer had a weapon, no connections, no team, no reputation. He tried to talk to me in the hallway later. It's just business, he said, smiling nervously. But for me, it was life, I replied. And now it's mine. After that conference, my phone never stopped ringing. Interviews, offers, investors, contracts, everything I had ever dreamed of. But inside, the old pain still lived. Not because I hadn't achieved success, but because I knew who was trying to take it away from me. Brad disappeared from my sight for several months. I almost believed that he would no longer be in my story. But as often happens in life, the past returns at the most unexpected moment. Once I went to a closed meeting with potential investors in New York. A luxurious hall, a high ceiling, a table made of black glass. I walked in, shook hands with the partners, and almost froze. Brad was sitting in the corner. His career was in tatters, but he still had ambitions. He got a job at a competing company and was trying to lure the same investors. He stood up and pretended to be glad to see me. "Michael, you are one step ahead, as always. Glad you're here." I chuckled. "I'm not glad, Brad. We both know why." The investors looked at us, feeling the tension. "If you want to know the truth," I said, turning to them, "this man tried to steal my project a year ago, remove me from the equation, and rewrite the future in his own name." A pause. "But as you can see, the present has put everything in its place." They didn't ask a single unnecessary question. They simply turned away from him and turned to me. The deal was done on the spot. Brad didn't even stay for dinner. He simply walked out, his shoulders hunched, and never looked me in the eye again. But I wasn't done yet. I didn't just want to rebuild. I wanted to show everyone that those who are betrayed can not only return, but fly so high that the betrayers will be forced to look up in complete silence. When you reach the top, you know it's not the end. It's just the beginning. And as I stood in that luxurious room, with partners who, like everyone else, would one day be grateful to me for the opportunity to be by their side, I realized one thing. Their respect is worth nothing if you don't believe in your own strength. My journey had been long, and although I was just beginning to see the fruits of my labor, I knew that all of this was just preparation for taking the final step. I understood that old enemies don't disappear. They change, they hide, but one day their ambitions will collide with reality again, and that moment will not be long in coming. After squeezing Brad out of the negotiations, I continued to expand my horizons. New projects, new partnerships, new ideas. The company grew, but not because I wanted to prove something to someone. I was not looking for revenge. I was looking for success that would be not only mine, but also my team's. The people who believed in me when everyone else doubted. But all this time I knew Brad was still around. Stealthily, like a shadow, he was trying to get back into the game, and his patience was running low, too. One day I received a letter. No appeal, no prelude. Just a document with an offer to buy my business. And who was the sender? An old friend, of course. I chuckled. It was funny in its own way. He thought I was going to sell out now. He was forgetting that not only was I coming back, but I was also living in the future, where he had never been able to jump. Without thinking, I sent a reply. He expected a refusal. That was understandable. But I offered him a meeting. When he walked into my office, I knew he wasn't interested in my company. He was only interested in what I had built. He wanted to be a part of it. He wanted to tear something out of what had been done on my terms. Are you here to offer me a deal, or are you here because of your troubled conscience? He squeezed his eyes shut, trying to hide his confusion. I need it all back. You took everything I ever built. You took everything. And now you're asking me to sell you everything I built to make my pain go away. He was silent, and there was a complete loss of hope in his eyes. I'll tell you what, Brad. You can't buy what I built. You can't take back what you once stole from me. Because your fight isn't over, and I don't want you to feel at peace. You don't deserve forgiveness. You only deserve this meeting. He was silent, trying to understand what was happening. I stood before him, holding tightly in my hands what had once been his dream. You don't deserve my business, Brad. But you will see me develop him. You will feel that bitter feeling when you understand that you can't go back, and that you will never be able to do it better. He was silent and left, but I knew that his life would never be the same, and I knew for sure that his failures were not my mistakes. It was his destiny, which he chose. I continued to develop the company, but not just for money or recognition. I built it for those who trusted me, those who were there when everything seemed impossible. And now they saw that a person who does not give up can achieve much more than someone who tries to ruin someone else's life for his own gain. But Brad was not gone yet. He remained in the shadows, and I knew that one day he would return, and I would be ready. A few months passed. The company was gaining momentum, and the world around me was starting to change. I had achieved what I had always dreamed of, but I felt like the final chapter of the story had not yet been written. Brad was still out there, trying to rebuild his career, but as always, following the same old script. Deceiving, manipulating, hoping for the easy way out. I knew that sooner or later he would try again, and I was preparing. One day I got a call. At first I didn't understand who it was. The voice was familiar, but it seemed different. "You know I'm back, right?" Brad said, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. I laughed. He thought I didn't know that he was still in the game, that his ambitions had not faded. But I knew everything he did was a disguise. He still wanted to destroy what I had created. But now that I stood at the top, he could not reach me. He always thought that everything could be bought or stolen. He was wrong. "Brad, are you still trying to find your way?" I asked slowly. "You understand that this is not a game? Do you understand that you can't get back what you've lost?" He was silent, and I knew that he was trying to take the time to come up with something to come out of this conversation as a winner. "I'm not going to destroy you, Brad. You're already destroyed. You just don't see it." I knew that he would fight to the end, but he would hardly be able to get up again. He tried to justify himself. I just want to negotiate. You understand how this works. We can work together. I can bring you profit. Take my side." I looked at my desk, at the same pile of papers that I had no longer paid attention to. Everything I've created, everything I've built, all this effort has been to prove not just to myself, but to everyone else, that you can't beat a man who won't give up. No, Brad. You would only be valuable if you learned to work honestly. But you didn't understand that. You thought you could be manipulated into getting everything you wanted without trying. But now you understand that there is a price for every action, and that price is your life. There was silence on the other end of the line. "You don't have to offer me anything. I've been through all this. You're living in the past, and I'm already in the future. And if you don't understand that this is your last mistake, then you've truly lost everything." I was quiet all this time. I knew my moment had come, and he couldn't understand it. Brad was blind to his own mistakes. "We'll never see each other again, Brad. But I want you to understand one thing. What you stole is now your punishment, because you will always look at me and what I have created. You will look at me, but always remain behind." Hanging up, I stood up and walked to the window. The city was noisy below. I knew Brad would try to get back into the game, but it would be impossible for him now. He had lost everything, and he knew it. A couple of weeks later, I was back on stage, this time in London. My project was at its peak, and I knew that this was no accident. It was not only the result of work, but also my desire to prove to everyone who doubted that success does not happen by chance. When I walked out on stage, the hall was full of investors and entrepreneurs. And suddenly, among them, I saw him. Brad. He was standing, hunched over in the back row. His gaze was invisible, but I knew that he was looking only at me. And I began to speak. "When I started, I did not know that I would be standing here. But now I know it was not an accident. It was a choice. The choice of someone who did not give up. I went through everything. But I also remember how they tried to stop me." I looked at Brad. His eyes were full of pain, uncertainty. He could not look me in the eye. "This is not revenge," I said, stopping and turning my attention to the audience. "It is simply justice. When you live your life honestly, when you do not try to deceive others, you get a reward. And I got my reward." The audience applauded. Brad, realizing that his time had passed, left the room, and he never returned. Now I knew, in this story, it was not revenge that won, but principle. I proved to myself that you can always win if you are not afraid to go all the way. Brad learned his lesson, but it was too late. And at that moment, among all those who had once doubted, I knew that I was now on top. But most importantly, I was where I was supposed to be. The day came when everything I had built would come to an end. I stood at the top that day, but not because I wanted to look down. No, I was there because I knew that the most important moments happen when everything you've lived through begins to make sense. Hundreds of people were looking at me, investors, colleagues, competitors. Some were jealous, some were applauding, and some were just sitting there with an expression on their faces as if they had just realized that their world would never be the same. I was ready. Everything that had happened over the years was no accident. It was a smooth movement, and every step, every mistake, and every victory added up to a story that I was going to finish. And then in the crowd, I saw him again. Brad. This time he wasn't hiding. He was right in front of me, like in the very center. He wasn't trying to hide anymore. He was standing there, and his eyes were full of despair. In his eyes, I read only one thing: the realization that his life had long since ceased to belong to him. I approached the microphone, and everyone present fell silent. In that moment, the world around me disappeared. It was only my word and my choice that I had to make, and I knew that this would be the last act, the last scene of this drama. People often ask what victory means, I began, slowly looking around the room. For most, it's just the final result. It's money, it's recognition, it's external success. But I'll tell you that victory is not something that can be measured in numbers. It's not something that can be bought or stolen. I turned to Brad, and all eyes in the room immediately switched to him. He was tense. His face turned pale. Everyone expected me to continue. I want you to understand one important thing. Sometimes victory is not a quick run to the finish line, but a long road on which you lose and on which you are betrayed. Revenge, as many people think, is not meant to be quick and flashy. Revenge is strategy. Revenge is timing. It is patience. It is knowing when and how to strike. I paused to let the weight of those words sink in. Brad, you made a mistake when you thought that by destroying me you had won. You thought you had broken me, but in reality, you had only created your own abyss. You failed to understand that when you try to take away someone else's dream, you are not taking it for yourself. You are only killing your own opportunity. At that moment, Brad tried to speak, but the words would not come out. He was trapped in his own silence, trapped in his own pride, his own helplessness. You, Brad, thought of me as an enemy. You were wrong. I was not your enemy. I was your lesson. I was your punishment. And now, Brad, when you stand before me, you don't just see a man who came back. You see someone who won. Not because I destroyed you, but because you destroyed yourself. With every word, the tension in the room grew. I felt the atmosphere become thick, almost tangible. I saw every eye on me. And in that moment, I knew that the ending to this story would be amazing. I took a step toward him and stopped. He couldn't leave. He couldn't hide. His mistake was public. You didn't get what you wanted, Brad. You tried to destroy not only my career, but my life. But I'll tell you this. You were wrong. You will never understand what winning is because you lost before you even started. In that moment, I felt all the strength, all the energy, all the path I'd walked gather inside me. It was a moment of truth, a moment when I realized that I had not only won, I had become who I was always meant to be. I turned to the audience. And here's what I want to tell you all. There is no obstacle you can't overcome if you truly believe in what you're doing. There is no enemy that can break you if you don't let them. When you stand before the test, before the betrayal, before all those who tried to lead you astray, the only thing you need to do is believe in yourself. And maybe someday, Many years from now, they will stand before you, and you will look at them as the ones who failed. With that, I left him there on that stage. Brad, who had once been my greatest adversary, now stood as a reminder that his ambitions could not bear the weight of reality. He was part of the past that had no place in the future. I stood up, and the crowd erupted in applause. I didn't hear them. I didn't look at them. All I felt was peace. The peace of someone who had been through the fire and now knew that he was the one who deserved to win. I walked off stage, and Brad was left standing there, alone in an empty room that, like his life, was no longer his. And as I walked down the hall, I knew one thing. I wasn't just back. I was back to change everything. My victory wasn't to punish him. My victory was to prove that no one can take your future away from you.